Today I want to talk about the topic of GPU undervolting. To begin with, this is my GPU. It's the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 laptop GPU. And this is the driver version number that I'm currently using. So, what is undervolting? Undervolting is very similar to overclocking. The only difference is that with undervolting we do not exceed the frequency that corresponds to the maximum GPU voltage, and I'm going to show that shortly. By our definition of undervolting, we need to find the GPU max voltage. For that, we need two programs. One for monitoring the GPU voltage and one for putting high load on the GPU, allowing it to max out so that we can refer back to our monitoring program and record the maximum voltage used by the GPU in that process. For monitoring, I am using the TechPowerUp GPU-Z program. It's a free program that can be downloaded directly from the TechPowerUp website. Here on the Sensors tab, we can monitor various variables, but the one that we're interested in is the GPU voltage. Here on the right, these are the current readings of these variables, and we can see that the GPU is currently using 0.8870 volts of voltage. The program that puts high load on the GPU is called Heaven Benchmark 4.0. Go ahead and launch the program. These are the settings that we need. Quality is set to high. Click on Run. And from here, click on Benchmark. Allow the benchmark to go to the end. After that, the program is going to give you a score. You can then close the program. After that, we can go to Settings on the GPU-Z window and click on Sensors. Click on Highest. OK. This will show the highest readings of these variables. The GPU, the highest voltage used by the GPU up to this point is 1.0810 volts. I didn't allow the benchmark to go to the end, but prior to that I allowed it to go to the end, and this was the highest amount of voltage used by the GPU. So I know this is the maximum GPU voltage of my graphics card. So I'm going to use this value to undervolt my GPU. The program that we need to undervolt the GPU is MSI Afterburner. So open it up. From here, we need to access the curve editor. This graph shows voltage values in the millivolt unit. But if you recall, our voltage is recorded in the volts unit. Now remember that 1 volt is equivalent to 1000 millivolt. So we need to convert this value to the millivolt equivalent value. We can use the calculator to multiply this number by 1000. 1.0810 multiplied by 1000. This is the equivalent in the millivolt unit. So we are going to replace this with this value. 1081 millivolt. So now we can search for this value down here. Okay, this is 1075. 1081 is next to it. So we are going to go up to this point. Okay. Now we need to note down the frequency that corresponds to our GPU max voltage. It is highlighted on the left. It is 2010 megahertz. So we will write it down. 2010 megahertz. What we need to do next is to add to the core clock a positive value. From my own testing, my GPU card can handle up to 170 megahertz. So by typing the value into this box and pressing enter, we get a new curve that is above the original curve. Now remember, our intention is to undervolt the GPU and not overclock it. So now we need to search for this frequency on the graph so that we use less voltage than this value to run at the same frequency. If we can't find this frequency exactly on the graph, then we'll use a value that is close to it, but on the condition that it is smaller than it as well. So we will search now for 2010 megahertz. We have to go down the curve and click on one of the points. This point has a value of 2060 megahertz, so we have to go further down to the left. Okay. Okay, I can't find 2010 exactly, so I'm going to use this point. It has a value of 2007 megahertz. Now we need to write down the corresponding voltage, which is highlighted down here. It is 943 millivolt. We want our GPU to max out at this voltage value. So for our undervolt profile, we need the GPU to max out at 943 millivolt. The frequency that corresponds to this voltage value is 2007 megahertz. Which is only 3 megahertz less than the previous frequency, which is a very small value, which is not going to be noticeable. Okay, so now what we need to do is to flatten out the curve beyond this highlighted point so that the GPU does not use voltage more than our selected voltage. Okay, so we need to click on the next point on the curve and push it all the way down to 2007 megahertz. We select our point back, the previous point, and we hold down the shift button, hold down the left mouse button, and select all the points to the right and press enter twice. Okay, so now in order for these new settings to take effect, we have to apply these new settings. So by clicking on apply, Our GPU is now undervolted. The way we test for GPU stability or voltage stability is to launch a program that puts high load on the GPU, like our previous program. We allow the benchmark to run to the end. If we don't see any artifacts on the screen, which are weird effects or lighting on the screen, or the benchmark did not crash, then we know our GPU is stable under the new undervolt settings. Okay, so if we started with 50 megahertz, applied the undervolt settings, and we tested the new settings with our benchmarking utility, if we didn't get any problem, then we can undervolt more. So instead of using 50, we can go up to 100 megahertz. And if that works, we go higher and higher. If at some point the GPU was unstable, we can immediately revert back to the default settings by clicking on this curved arrow. Okay, so after we know the values at which our GPU is unstable, we can use a smaller value. So if, for example, 200 didn't work, if the GPU was unstable at positive 200, we try 190. And if that is unstable, we push it down by a value of 10. Yeah, for my particular GPU, I went all the way to 200. I started, for example, with 100. It was stable, and then I went to 150. It was stable. At 200, however, it was unstable. So I kept pushing down the core clock by 10 megahertz. I went to 190, and the GPU was still unstable. It was only until I went down to 170 megahertz that my GPU was stable. So this is how we test for stability. We start with a small value, apply the undervolt settings, and launch a benchmark or a program that puts high load on the GPU. If there are no artifacts or crashes, then we know our GPU is stable, and we can undervolt more. That is how we perform the undervolting. It's by trial and error. That is how we do it. Once we have found a value that is stable for our GPU, and we have guaranteed that they are stable, we can save the settings. Okay, so we can click on this button and save the undervolt settings to one of the 5 profiles. If you don't have any profile that you have settings saved to it, then you can choose the first profile. This is my undervolt profile. I can choose it and click on apply. And because I know it is stable, I can click on this button right here. It will apply these settings as soon as I log into Windows. So after I reboot my PC and log in, these settings will be applied automatically. I don't have to go back and select the profile and apply the settings manually. Okay. So make sure your settings are stable before you click on this button. Do not click on this button if the GPU is unstable at the new settings that you are testing.